Hey guys, welcome back. So today I brought home this ETQ generator. It is rated at 2700 watts and has a brushless power head. This one I found on Facebook Marketplace. It was listed only at $80, and according to the listing it ran well when last used, but of course it was put away for some time and now it doesn't start. So most likely it is a fuel issue. There is fuel in the tank. Thankfully, the tank's in pretty good shape. The cap's not rusted, and if you look down in the tank, I don't see any rust, but I do see some old fuel, so that does need to come out. I've also pulled the engine over. There is good compression, so I don't think we have an issue there. I'm sure it's fuel. So I'm going to get you set up a little bit better. I want to check that oil real quick, and if it looks good, we'll try starting it, see if we get any signs of life. Yeah, the oil's low and needs to be changed, but I'm going to just top it off for now, and we'll change it later. Before actually trying to start this, I'm going to pull the bowl drain. I noticed the fuel valve seems to be on, but it is broken. So I want to make sure fuel's at least making it to the carburetor. Also we're missing the airbox cover. The filter's still there, so we'll have to deal with both those issues at some point, but I want to hear it run first. Yeah, nothing is making it to the carburetor. So either we have a stuck needle and seat, or that fuel valve is a bigger issue than just a broken lever. I did try turning that stub that was left with the pliers, and it immediately broke off. So yeah, maybe the carb's the issue, maybe the valve, or somewhere in between. I'm not sure, but the tank does need to be dealt with. So I think for now, I'm just going to eliminate it from the mix. We'll get it uninstalled. I'll hook up the test tank right to this line and see if we get any flow into that carburetor. Okay, let's turn the fuel on, see what happens. Oop. And we get fuel. So it might be as simple as that. Let's put the drain plug back in, turn the fuel back on, and try to start it. I've got the fuel valve turned on, circuit breaker's on, and the light is plugged in and turned on. I also checked the throttle plate, made sure it wasn't stuck, so if this does start, it won't race out of control. And I get nothing from that engine, but the choke lever is not closing all the way, so I'm going to give it a little squirt of starting fluid and try this again. Not too bad. The engine sounds good, and the power head makes power. Now, the carburetor, I mean, it runs the engine, but it was struggling. I did have to put the choke on, at least as far as it would go, to keep the engine running. And after about 30 seconds, I could turn it off, but the engine speed was unsteady. So that carburetor needs to come off and be cleaned. And I'll take a closer look at that choke lever to see why it won't fully engage. So the detent on this carburetor is not really working, and even if it was, it hits the airbox. So something isn't quite right. The gasket here, it's actually double gasketed, so clearly someone's been in here before. It looks like this one's homemade, and for all I know, this is the wrong carburetor. But I know the condition of it's not too bad. It's not flooding over. It does run the engine, so it may just need to be cleaned. But given that the detent isn't really working, I'm probably not going to use this carburetor. I do have a couple others. You know, this one in particular is the same brand and has a good detent. So most likely I'll go with this one, but I do want to open this up, just take a look at how bad it is, and probably measure the jets and compare these two just to see if the jetting is similar. I mean, ideally, I'd like it to run a little bit richer. So if I find a jet that's a little bit bigger, I'll move it over into this carb. Yeah, it actually looks really good. So we'll get the jets out, see what size they are, and just compare them. see if we can't get the jet out just by pushing down on the emulsion tube, which is not present. So now I know where this one came from. This was from the Predator I picked up a few months back that was running pretty bad, and that's because the emulsion tube was missing. So most likely I can just move the tube over from the other one and give this one a go. To find the jet size, I'm just using this micro drill bit set, and I'm just going to keep going until I find the last one that fits. This is the Predator main jet, and it was a slightly bigger engine, so I'm expecting the Predator one to be a little bigger. And it looks like 67 is the last one that fits. Let's try the one from the ETQ. Does not fit on the 67 or the 66, but it does fit on the 69. So yeah, this jet is smaller and the Predator one is larger. So I am going to stick with the original jetting for now, but it's good to know if we're still too lean, we do have the option of going up a size. Let's check the pilot jet from the ETQ. So the last one to fit is a 77. Let's try that on the Predator pilot jet. And that does not fit. The Predator pilot jet's actually smaller at size 79. So yeah, we'll stick with the original jetting, but if we're too lean, we have options. If we're too rich, we have options. We'll take the emulsion tube and move it to the Predator. All right, let's give that a try. The good news is it's no longer surging. The engine's running really well, and actually a little bit too good. It was at 70 hertz without a load. So I backed off the tension on the governor spring pretty much all the way. There's no tension left, and the engine kept running fast. It was at about 65 hertz, but it would slow down when manually working the governor arm. So that eliminates a few things. I guess by being able to slow it down manually, that tells me the idle set screw is not preventing the throttle plate from closing. It also tells me that the throttle plate isn't hanging up. So those, I think I can cross off the list. The only other two things that come to mind are either a bad governor inside the engine or one that's out of adjustment and potentially needs to be reset. So in order to test that, I do need to slide the carb off a bit, pull this governor rod out, and then we can double check the calibration. This is going to be kind of hard to show you because this bracket is in the way, but I have this rod disconnected from the carburetor, and I also disconnected the governor spring itself so that way the governor arm moves freely. Now you need to get your bearings first with the throttle plate. Make sure you know where idle is and where full throttle is. In this case, you can use the idle set screw as a reference for finding where idle is, and this is full throttle. So you want to have it in full throttle, have the carb pushed up against the body of the generator, and this 90-degree here should line up right about there where it drops into the carburetor. And if it's off, when you pull this all the way in the same direction, it will either be too short or too long. And in this case, it is too long by about 1/4 of an inch. And it doesn't seem like much, but the governor's kind of range of travel to influence the throttle plate is pretty limited. And what happens is it maxes out and it can't close the throttle anymore. And that's what we're seeing. So I think this governor needs to be reset. Going to just reconnect this, but I'm going to leave the governor spring disconnected. And I will tighten this loosely, just so that the carburetor is held right against the insulator. Before loosening this bolt, just make sure you get your bearings again. That right there is idle, and that's full throttle. And take note of which way this is rotating. So full throttle is clockwise, so you want to hold this in full throttle, loosen that, and turn this clockwise until it stops, and then tighten this back up. If you do it wrong, the engine can run out of control quite a bit faster than what I just saw. And also, some of these governor shafts are not held in with a pin, so when you loosen this, there is a chance that that could drop into the engine. And I don't know if this has that or not, so yeah, I'm going to try to hold on to that while loosening this up, just so that there's no drama. Let's try this again. I've reconnected the governor spring, haven't touched the tension on that spring. So if the governor is working properly and properly calibrated, it should close that throttle and either idle the engine or just stall it because it's running too slow. You know, last time it was at 65 hertz with this spring tension. Let's see if it's any better. Much better. That was much better. The engine started, it was running quite slow, so I increased the spring tension. I drove the screw about halfway in, got the engine up to 62 hertz, and things were running just fine, which I'm a little surprised about because after the calibration, visually I could not see the difference where this shaft was versus where it is now, but it doesn't take much. And when holding this rod where I was earlier, it didn't move it quite a quarter of an inch. I'd say more like an eighth of an inch, but that's all it needed. The governor now has control of the engine, so I think we're ready to move on and deal with that tank. But before I do that, I noticed the nut here on the exhaust is loose for some reason. So I'll torque that down and move on to the tank. I'm not sure this nut was ever tight from the factory. I can only drive it down so far, and then it actually hits the side of the exhaust pipe, and you can't tighten it any further. So I'm going to check my stash, see if I have any nuts that'll actually go down all the way. Wasn't able to find anything in my stash that will fit all the way down the threads without hitting this pipe, but I did find this one. It is slightly larger. It doesn't engage the threads, but it does drop all the way in place, and that'll act as a spacer. And then that will allow me to tighten this down properly and actually hold this together. Came across this fuel valve in my stash. It is brand new. It has a filter, which this one doesn't have. I think the biggest difference is there's no sediment bowl, but it does have an on-off lever. So let's see if this one fits. Almost missed it, but this engine mount is broken, and the guy before me just used a piece of wire to kind of hold things together. But I think I can do better than that. I do have extra engine mounts. I think this one will fit, so we'll give it a try. Anyway, you get the idea. This thing's a mess. I'm going to spend some time cleaning it up. And the airbox will be here tomorrow. So when that arrives, we'll get that attached and bring this outside. We'll do a load test because I think we're at that point. Airbox showed up today and I was about to bolt it on, but something isn't sitting right with the way the governor was and the adjustment that was needed. The original carb, although it was running the engine poorly, it wasn't overspeeding the engine. So I was concerned that the Predator carb that I put on there Was there something wrong with it? And some of you may have seen the video on the Predator where this came from, but that machine had quite a bit of damage on the frame and all the engine mounts were broken. And I got a lot of comments from people saying that the generator fell off a truck, as in literally fell off a truck. So it had me concerned that maybe the carburetor had suffered damage in that event. And I wanted to make sure that this plastic piece up here was attached firmly to the metal shaft. And it is. And this piece here, the metal shaft, actually is elongated. So it's really not possible for it to rotate out of place. Whereas the original carb on this machine actually is round. So this one is more likely to kind of move out of place. But, things look good. And I also opened both of these up to full throttle and just put them side by side. I wanted to make sure that they were pointing in the same direction and that the alignment is good. And as far as I can tell, they match. So the fact that it was over revving with this carburetor, I think it was just because this carburetor was actually performing the way that it should. And that just highlighted the fact that something was out of adjustment. How it got that way, I don't know. But I feel better now using this carburetor, knowing that it's good. And just for comparison, I wanted to stick these two generators side by side. The one on the right is also a Honda clone. It's 420 cc's, and that's what I normally see, what I normally work on. This little guy on the left, it's only 163 cc's, and it's a very substantial difference. I don't think it comes across very well in the video unless I get them side by side. Anyway, let's get this little guy outside. We'll get it started up and put it to the test. This one surprised me a bit. This generator is only rated at 2,700 watts, and these little engines tend to overpromise and underdeliver, but I just exceeded the rated wattage by 100 watts, and the engine not only stayed above 58 hertz, but it was closer to 61 hertz, 118 volts. So this one is definitely over-delivering and under-promising, which is refreshing. Usually manufacturers do the opposite. Anyway, this one was a fairly easy fix. I think the biggest exception is the governor. That, still don't know why it was off, but I'm glad making that adjustment fixed the governor issue. Anyway, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.